Hey folks, Roger Marsh here with Raceway Ministries, and I'm excited today to be a part of this particular session that has to do with what makes up a healthy Raceway Ministry team. And of course, as you know, we've talked many times from a church perspective or from a Raceway Ministries perspective about what a healthy Raceway Ministry team looks like and things that should characterize it. But one of the most important things that we could ever realize is what it looks like from NASCAR's perspective. We go to a lot of different raceways and speedways. Many of them are NASCAR, some of them are Speedway Motorsports, some are independent. And then we have weekly tracks, of course, that sometimes are sanctioned by NASCAR, but owned by independent owners. And they all have expectations as well as to what a Raceway Ministry team should look like. So I'm just absolutely excited today to have with us Tim Southers and Tim Byrd. Tim Southers is Guest Services Director for 2 or 3 different raceways that comprise what I think is called the Mid-Atlantic region. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. It's now 4 tracks. We have Watkins Glen.
Okay. All right. So you have Martinsville, which Tim is associated with. You have Darlington, you have Richmond, and now Watkins Glen. So you're kind of the guest services overseer for all 4 of those speedways. And Tim has been one of our associate board of director members for a couple of years, and it's been a great asset to us to help us understand things from the NASCAR perspective. And then, of course, Tim Byrd. Tim, you've been helping lead Raceway Ministries Martinsville for how long now?
Oh, gosh, 20 plus years. Let's just leave it at that.
20 plus years, all the way into your retirement, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
enjoying that.
All right. So Tim Byrd has worked with Tim Southers for a number of years to help fine-tune and really produce one of the most effective Raceway Ministry teams that we have. And a lot of that has to do with the leadership that Tim and Michael Harrison have provided. But I want to tell you, a lot of it has to do with what Tim Southers has been able to do to help us become effective in Raceway Ministries work there at Martinsville. And I would have to say, Tim has been a tremendous influence also at Richmond and at Darlington. And so, Tim, we are very appreciative for you. In fact, I want to begin by saying that God has really blessed us through the years in Raceway Ministry work, all the way back to the 1970s and 1980s when we were first getting started with doing ministry and outreach at NASCAR Speedways. NASCAR has been so good to us. Tim, your predecessor, Dean Kurtz, opened the door for us big time back in 2001. And, you know, Dean, along with guys like Patrick Barfield and Gary Weir, Marianne Shoemake there at Watkins Glen, through the years have just been so good to us. And we don't ever want to take it for granted that we're able to come onto y'all's property and be able to reach out and share God's love by being the hands and feet of Jesus and just serving the needs of the fans. We are grateful, and we want you to know that we are very grateful for that. So that brings me to this. What makes for a good, healthy, strong, vibrant Raceway Ministry team? As I said before, many times we have our own ideas from the Raceway Ministries perspective, but what we really need is to know what that looks like from the Raceway perspective. And so Tim has graciously put together for us 10 incredible, awesome bullet points to help us understand what a healthy, good, solid Raceway Ministry team looks like from his guest services perspective. And so, Tim, what I'd like to do is take your bullet points and just kind of move through them, and then let you or Tim Byrd elaborate on them as you want to make sure that we understand. Now, for all of our attendees at the Refuel Conference, this is a page in your handbook. And if you want to follow along right now, that's fine. Or if you want to refer to them later on, that's fine too. But let's just go through them one by one. Anything you'd like to say in terms of introduction, Tim Southers or Tim Byrd, before we get started going through these bullet points?
No, it's just been a privilege and an honor to be a part of this. And I want to thank you and Tim and Michael and everybody that I've come in contact. You know, Charles and Debbie do a great job with the Richmond group. You've had Eddie come on board and Philip come on board at Darlington to get that off to a great start. And I'm really the blessed one and lucky one because you've got so many dedicated volunteers. And I apologize for not being able to be there. My wife had knee replacement surgery, so that's why we're having to record this. But I'll be around if anybody has any questions or needs anything. They want to talk to me one-on-one. And even if they're working other tracks that I'm not a part of, I'll make sure I can get that contact information to them and get them to the right people they need to talk to.
All right, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Tim. You're always so helpful, always in the loop. And I know if somebody needs to get in touch with you for anything, you're always available, and we appreciate that. Tim Byrd, any introductory words from you?
Just, we're getting ready to start this is our 34th year of ministry here at Marsh Speedway, and we have been incredibly blessed throughout that history to have outstanding direct contacts, whether it be whatever the title has been over the years, whether it's guest services or whatever. Men like LD Oaks, Jim Roundtree, now Tim Southers, and you combine that with the great scenario we have with a track president who is a man of faith, and it just makes the bumps in the roads a lot smoother.
Yeah.
And has really been a real blessing to us over the years as we've had the opportunity to serve here at the Speedway.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys have been blessed in a big way, and we're so grateful for that. Speaking of bumps in the road, let's go through these bullet points, because I think if we take these bullet points seriously, it'll create fewer bumps in the road along the way, okay? So here we go. Point number 1. Tim says, find the proper contact at the facility to begin a conversation. And that would be guest services, track operations, event experience, general manager, whoever. So I take the emphasis there, Tim, to be on finding the proper contact person. Describe to us how important that really is.
Well, the biggest thing is, obviously, I'm blessed enough to have such great relationships with everybody. I have a full understanding. But NASCAR, like any business in America, especially coming out of COVID, we're short-staffed. We've had a lot of turnover. And like at Michigan, they've hired a new assistant guest services director, and I've actually started to have calls with her every 2 weeks.
Okay.
She's young, but she's very energetic, and she gets it. She's wanting to learn.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is you got to make sure you're not wasting time. You need to find that right person that can be the one to be that contact to help you, and they understand. And that's one thing you'll need to do as your group is you need to make sure whoever that contact is, you need to make sure they have a full understanding of what you're wanting to do and what your goals are for that weekend, and see how you can work together, and you might have to go a little extra. You might have to, you can't assume you're going to have to maybe start from scratch every year, because unfortunately you might be dealing with a brand new person every time you go to that track. And although you've got a lot of experience in doing things, the way we've done them, you might have to educate that new contact. So that's the most important thing, is making sure you find that right person, because you don't want to spend so much time with somebody and then find out, well, I should have been talking to somebody else, because
Exactly.
they really can't.
Yeah.
So if you let them know up front what your goals are and what your needs might be, then they should either be able to help you, or if they're doing their job correctly, they'll get you to the right person at that facility.
Exactly. And Tim, you make a good point there. It could be anybody with any title, and it varies from one to the other. For the 4 tracks that you are working with, it would be the guest services person, I'm sure. At some of the tracks, some of the SMI tracks, we work most closely with the operations department. So it would be better for a person to find out, and as soon as possible, who that person is. And it's easier nowadays more than ever, because you can have Zoom calls with them and you can begin the dialogue real quick. So first point is be sure to find that proper contact and begin that conversation. And don't wait till the week before race week to do it. You need to do it now, is really the timing. Bullet point number 2, explain the mission and goals of Raceway Ministries being a part of the event weekend. Tim, let me ask you to react to this. Glenn and I typically tell people when they ask us, what do you want to do? We just tell them that we want to be the feet and the hands of Jesus to help the race fans have the greatest experience possible while they're on the property at your raceway. Is that a good summary goal? We also add to that, we want to serve you in any way that we can. If you need golf cart drivers, we're willing to do that. If you need elevator operators, we're willing to do that. We just want to serve and help your fans have a great experience. What are you expecting in terms of a goal from Raceway Ministries?
Well, just, I think especially with our younger employees and newer employees in the company, just so they get an understanding, because sometimes it can be misconstrued, or that they can think, oh, you're just going to here to have a church service. And let me reiterate, as I've told you, Roger, and Tim knows, and, being a part of guest service is not a requirement if you want to get started there. Hopefully there's a way we can find common ground to work together, because we are, my department, we see the fans. We're the most hands-on and interactive with the fans. And this is a great opportunity of us finding a way to mesh our goals together to, like you said, to give the fans a good experience. But maybe we can find a way where guest services can use the help of Raceway Ministry volunteers and vice versa, so we can help make it a great weekend. And fortunately enough, I'm able to give a little bit of money and donation. It's not a lot of money, and I know none of us do it for the money, but it's, I want to compensate the groups as best I can for their help, because they do provide a great service. And it varies at tracks. Different tracks serve meals. Some, like Raceway Ministries here at Martinsville, does the golf carts, and they do a wonderful job. But that's one of the things we look for. It can be helpful to help get your foot in the door at that track too, because as we all know, everybody's hurting for help, and we can never have enough help on race weekends. So if there's a way, but I never, at least at my tracks, I never want to take away from the core, which is you're interacting with those fans and you're sharing the love of Jesus with them, because I'm a man of faith too, and that's very important to me, because that can make a big difference, and we never know how we're affecting somebody's life at that racetrack.
Well, we're very blessed, because many of the people we relate to are like you, Tim. They are men of faith, and they understand what our mission is, and they understand that we want to put the perspective and not come out there and beat people up with the Bible, but we want to serve also. But sometimes we run into people that are not men of faith, and it causes us to have to be very sensitive when we approach them with our mission and our goals. And if we come on too strong, it can be kind of scary to them sometimes. So I think it's important that we put it in the right terms.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for anybody that's trying to start up this relationship with the Speedway, for Raceway Ministry opportunities, I think it's very important to come in with the attitude of, how can we help you?
Yes.
How can we make your race event weekend better?
Yes.
Just like Jesus did. Let's meet those physical needs, those tangible needs.
Yeah.
And that's going to give you the opportunities, hopefully moving forward, to get into to more ministry type opportunities. But come in with the attitude of, how can our group help your Speedway? How can our group make your, one thing we always tell Tim every weekend is, you've given us some responsibilities to be taken care of for that weekend. We don't want you to have to worry about those. You go worry about the 10,000 other things that are going on.
Yeah.
And let us handle our responsibilities, and you can deal with that. So that's, I think, coming in with just an attitude of, how can we help?
Perfect.
Is going to create a good, solid foundation.
Very good. Bullet point number 3, as in the case of Raceway Ministries, they assist guest services in various duties at Martinsville and Richmond Raceway. This is not a requirement to be at a NASCAR-owned facility. And Tim, you've already elaborated on this a little bit. It's not a requirement, but it sure can open the door. And like you pointed out, Tim Byrd, if you're faithful in doing those things, God's going to make sure there's a way to be able to do ministry in the midst of all that. It's going to open up an opportunity. So anything else along those lines, guys?
Well, I would just very quickly say, when we first started here 30 plus years ago, it looked a lot different than it does now. When the Speedway came to us, probably, I guess it's been maybe close to 10 years ago, and asked us to take on guest services responsibilities with the special needs shuttles. To be quite honest, I was a little bit leery of that, because we had created a very good little niche, if you will, of what we were doing for the Speedway, providing our hospitality tents during our worship services. And I think the job that we were able to do that, and did it in a way that was pleasing to the Speedway and to the fans, gave us that opportunity to take that next step. Even though I was a little reluctant, I think, to take it at first, because I knew if we mess this up, it could really hurt our ministry opportunity. But as it typically does when we step out in faith, this has been a real blessing to our ministry, and we've made so many great relationships through being able to do that, which has just magnified the effect of our ministry here at Speedway.
Good.
Our early campers, that's one of the first things I hear. Where's our Raceway Ministry buddies at? And they know some of them by name, and they actually ask for those people to give them rides. I mean, so that's, I just let the newer members with Raceway Ministries know that when you build those relationships, especially with the campers, they remember you. If they have a good experience, they remember you. And I know several of our members here, they tell me that they have fans every year say, hey, pray for me, my mother's sick. Or I mean, there's so many opportunities to come about that relationship building, as you first talked about at the start of this. It's huge. And believe me, our fans love Raceway Ministries. They might not like me sometimes, but they love Raceway Ministries all the time.
Well, I had somebody tell me at one raceway at one time, you guys in Raceway Ministry, you be the good guys, we'll be the bad guys.
That's exactly right. That's what I tell all my groups. You don't ever get in an argument with somebody, or if they give you a hard time, you call me. I get paid to be the bad guy. I want you to be the good guy.
All right, point number 4, be flexible as to setup locations. It could change from event to event based on the needs of the track. How often does that happen?
Well, I want to give a shout out to my dear friends at Richmond, because Charles and Debbie and their entire group, bless them so much. When I first started and we were in COVID and then coming out of COVID, we had to move them numerous times. And I think we finally got settled down now to where we have quote unquote standard locations. But I want to thank Charles and Debbie and their entire group at Richmond Raceway Ministries, because nobody ever got upset. They never said anything bad. They said, do what we got to do. And Todd Comby was there before he took on his new role in his ministry down in Texas. He said, Tim, you just tell us. And that's where the communication comes into play, because I felt terrible, because as you well know, guys, I can have things change in my world 2 or 3 times a race weekend. And, but everybody's always been flexible and great to work with. And yes, it gets frustrating. I get frustrated about it sometimes, but I want to thank them especially, because the folks at Richmond, we had to move several times there, a couple races in a row, and they said, whatever we need to do. And I think we've got their main tent back to where it used to be, where they like it. And then we've got another secondary tent location near one of the biggest entrances of the Speedway, but near the only main public parking lot that we have there now. So hopefully it's working out good for everybody.
Good. Well, what you mentioned about communicating and staying in touch with people, it's really important when it comes to changes that can happen, like change of location or change of schedule or anything. Your point number 5 is over communicate with your contact at the track. Never assume anything, and ask the same from your track contact. I would assume that relationship where you can work with a team and make changes and kind of jerk them around a little bit in terms of their location or whatever, that's solved a lot through communication. So talk about this, Tim, over communicating with your contact at the track.
I've been in the business now. This is my 31st year in racing. And a lot of times it's human nature. We get set in a routine, and we're comfortable with how it is. And sometimes you can let that comfort get in the way of communicating and making sure you've got all the dots, all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. And I probably get, to the Raceway Ministry folks there in person, they probably get tired of me sometimes, because I do call quite a bit. I know Tim, I burn his email and phone up sometimes, but I would rather double, triple check and make sure we're good to go, because we're always, and if you're in this business long enough, all the Raceway Ministry folks, volunteers understand things change all the time. And that's just life in general, but especially at the racetrack. We could have an emergency situation happen, or we could have weather issues happen, and we just have to be flexible. But by communicating, especially like I said, with all the new employees NASCAR seems to have a lot of different tracks, I want to emphasize that, to try not to assume, say, hey, we've always set our tent up here and this is what we do every race. Well, just make sure your contact knows that, and you know what they're expecting from you, because when you get to the track, a lot of times it's like me, and y'all know this. I mean, I'll check in with y'all always. I do it every track, but then I've got 4 or 5 things I'm being called on the radio to take care of at the same time. So getting that done ahead of race time or race weekend really can make a big difference for everybody and ease everybody's stress levels.
That's a great point. Do it in advance. And I would say too, to some of our people that maybe are not accustomed to this, don't be afraid of or don't be intimidated by these people with staff positions at the raceway. Call them, email them, get in touch with them, because the more things that are taken care of in advance, the better off everybody is when it comes to race week.
And I would say that any new group that's getting their feet wet at the Speedway and building those relationships is don't make assumptions. When you have to start a conversation with, oh, well, I thought it was okay if we did this. It's always better to say, hey, we were thinking about doing this particular activity or passing out this particular piece of literature or providing this service. Is that okay? It's as the old saying goes, that I guess it's better to ask for, in this case, it's better to ask for permission than forgiveness. Because you may not get the forgiveness.
Yes, that's exactly right. Good point, Tim. Well, let's move on. Let's talk insurance. If you're bringing equipment to the facility, be prepared to provide insurance for your equipment and your organization. More important nowadays than ever, Tim. So give us a scoop on insurance.
Yes, don't want to scare anybody off, but like operating the golf carts here at Martinsville. Tim's group through the Henry County Baptist Association, they provide a rider for insurance. And that's something, unfortunately, in this day and time with tort litigation and things like that, it would blow your members' minds to know how much legal litigation NASCAR receives in a year's time.
Yeah.
Case in point, I can't go into details, obviously, but we had a situation here last year where a person said they were injured and lawyered up. And I trust Tim and Michael and their entire team. They know, and I tell this to all my groups that work for me, not only Raceway Ministries, but other civic groups. I don't care how minor the incident is, I need to know about it when it happens. This person didn't bother to even be seen by our medical staff on property. Nobody did anything, as far as our Raceway Ministry volunteers. And then I get a letter from a lawyer 6 weeks later saying, due to your negligence, yada, yada, yada. Now, I don't know how that goes, because once we get that stuff, I turn it over to legal, and then unless I have to give a deposition, I'm not involved in anything. But I just want to stress that's why if you work with a group and an organization and they wonder why they're making you sign a contract, and there's ways we can work around things, and that's where that communication, that relationship building comes into play. Because I have a civic group, a band boosters group at Richmond that can't get insurance. So I had to get a waiver, but I have to basically, because of that relationship and because of they've been there about 10 years at Richmond. So we have a relationship to build on, and plus they do what we ask them to do and they follow the rules and guidelines. So I've been able to convince and ask our track president, which is Lori at Richmond, and also our legal staff in Daytona. It's better for us to use a group that understands what we have to do than it would be for us to go try to hire people off the streets, so to speak, and do that job. Now, I am in the process now, because we're really getting an emphasis on that. I'm actually talking to insurance companies to see if I can get the rider policy, and then I will take care of the cost of that if I have to. But the Raceway Ministry Group now, as it's set up, they're not requiring any insurance requirement, like for Darlington to come in there and do that. They're not requiring any insurance. But I just want to emphasize to everybody, we never know from year to year or how the market situation happens, where we could get a call from legal saying, hey, Tim, we've got to start doing this. And I just need to know, especially if you want to bring your own equipment like golf carts or anything like that. It's just because there's so many issues we have to look out for. If that makes sense.
Well, it really does. And I would add to that, for our attendees at the conference and any of our Raceway Ministries people, one of the things that we are working on, and we think we have it in place, is an insurance coverage option from National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And it requires a level of participation with us, obviously, because there's some investment involved there. But we do have that available. We're going to try to make that work for any of our teams that might need insurance coverage and don't have it through a church or a Baptist association, something like that. Next point, try to be as self-sufficient as possible. NASCAR staffing has been reduced. I would add to that, for what we do in Raceway Ministry work, we should be self-sufficient, because we shouldn't be dependent upon NASCAR staff to do what we're there to do. But elaborate on that briefly, if you would.
I have relationships worked out with some of our vendors where we can provide some assistance in some ways. But I know, like the case at point at Darlington, you noticed when it was so hot a couple times, I would have to call that vendor. And the vendor, he's a really good guy. And I think I've got it worked out now where I can start giving him a contact to work with directly. But a lot of times I'd have to go get whatever we might need from any vendor, but this one particular vendor. And sometimes I might be dealing with a medical situation, or I might be gone. I have to go deal with issues in the campground. And some of those issues might take 30 minutes or more. Yeah. And I know I don't want y'all to wait and have to, where the fans have a bad experience with your group because I can't get them what they need. Yeah. So, and then that's another thing where communication comes into play. How can we try to do as much as we can ahead of time to make sure you have what you need? And like case in point, like for Darlington and here at Martinsville, I make sure the power's working where the main tent's set up. I make sure the water's working before you get there. That doesn't mean it might not work during the weekend if something happens, but at least we try to test everything and make sure it's ready. And I just want to make sure that everything, because I want your folks to come as volunteers. I want them to have a good experience too. I mean, there's going to be things that happen, but I don't want them to get frustrated because I'm not able to be everywhere at all times or be able to help them. So the more self-sufficient they are, I mean, I'll do anything I can to help every group, and I hope everybody knows that. It works with me. But, the more you can be self-sufficient, the better and smoother your operation will go for the entire week.
I would say, for example, ice. If Tim has agreed at his raceway to help us have ice at our tent, something may happen during the week and Tim may be inaccessible to do that. be on standby to go to Love's Truck Stop or wherever and pick up your own ice. Just be prepared.
And my folks at Richmond had to deal with that a little bit. And I was able, my wife took my phone away from me in the hospital, but I was trying to reach out to as many people as I could and make sure all that was handled and everything. I think it worked out okay.
Okay.
And I think that's a really good point of emphasis for any new group to do a lot of pre-planning, to think about the logistics of the resources that you're going to need.
Yes.
Don't show up on race weekend. Oh gosh, we don't have any coolers, or we don't have this or that. And it's a little bit easier for us because we've been there and done that, and we've got resources, we've got trailers, we've got a truck, we've got chairs, we've got what we need to run our ministry. But for somebody that's getting something established, sometimes it's trial by error.
Yeah.
But hopefully, if you can do some pre-planning around what your responsibilities are going to be, hopefully have those resources in place to make your weekend a success.
Absolutely. Well, self-sufficiency is the key word there, and plan ahead big time for sure. The next point, educate your group on the rules and guidelines that need to be followed. Very, very important there, because we've had instances where we've been asked to lead a raceway because we didn't follow the rules, and we don't want to get into that. How important is that, Tim?
Well, I know you brought up some scenarios at other tracks too, and we actually had a situation last spring at Arlington, where we had it approved by the track president, but somebody from Daytona came down there and lost their mind for a little bit, but we got it all worked out. But there again, just make sure, and it could be something as simple as bringing drinks. And I want to emphasize that because I felt so bad last year. Joey Martin went out and bought a bunch of small waters and things like that to give away. And NASCAR has contracts with certain vendors. And believe me, those vendors watch, and they get out on property and they look and see. And if they see a chance where, because they're paying NASCAR a lot of money to be on this property, so they obviously have a business interest. And if they see certain things going on certain ways, they go straight. They don't bother with clay. They go above clay to people that they're dealing with out of Daytona. So just make sure, just let that person know what you're doing ahead of time. We were able to work through that, like giving out the lemonade that a lot of people do, which I love, the lemonade at all the tracks. On a hot day, it really makes a big difference. But there, we can't really give it out like in a bottled way. But if you got cups and you got it in a cooler, there's no issue there. Same thing with coffee in the morning. I know with Arlington, they do a breakfast, and Richmond, they give out cookies and things like that for the kids, which is great. And that's fine. It should just make sure, don't assume anything. So the last thing I want to do, because I know everybody's funds and resources are very limited, I hate for them to go out there and buy cases and cases of drinks or whatever they might do, and then they show up on property, and then all of a sudden somebody walks up to them and goes, "You can't give that out here. Pack it up." And so that's why I want to put that point in there.
Well, communication, and do it ahead of time. Don't wait till race week to find out that something you're doing doesn't fit the rules. Find out ahead of time. Coordinate with the track on schedule setup, credential requests, any assistance from the track needed before event week. And I think the emphasis on this point is if you wait until event week, it may not happen. So Tim, stress for us the importance of taking care of these things in advance.
But one of the things I do that's unique just to my 4 tracks, I don't think any other guest services person does it, but because my groups, and like I said, we started off the conversation, it's challenging sometimes to get help, and that's true for Raceway Ministries. You might have some people that are on the fence, and then they decide at the last minute they can make it. So what I try to do, and a credential is not necessary. If you're set up outside the actual fenced-in gates of the track, you don't need a credential, but I want to offer that to the volunteers. So, and there will be several people that you assign. So say we have an injury situation or a situation inside the track, we would need to get a minister or some of the ministry people, volunteers, in there to assist in that situation if the family asks for it or if we deem that it could be helpful. So they have to have a credential to get through the gate, but not everybody's required to have one. But I want to, as a way to say thank you from NASCAR, be able to credential as many people that want one as I can. And as you know as well as anybody, how busy I get on race weekend. I can get it done, but it might be the next day or that night before I can actually get to my computer, because with all the security issues and unfortunately with what we're seeing going on in the world today, it wouldn't surprise me at all to have more security measures put in place for this year. But one of the things we do now, they require a photo ID, and you have to go on the computer and fill out everything, or through your phone at least. And that takes some time. And there again, I don't want to scare anybody out because I know some people aren't great with technology. I'm not. I have a 22-year-old daughter that makes me look smart. But if they get that information to me ahead of time, then what I try to do is go ahead and have all those credentials ready and give them out actually to the leader of that group before race weekend even gets there. So they've got everything they need. They can look at their list. They know their list better than I do. And they can say, Tim, we're good to go, or can you get these other people, make sure, because I'm not perfect and I've got 10 million things to do. I could miss somebody. But that way, just that, and then you know the schedule as far as like if you need to come in and load in and set up your stuff, you need to communicate that, because a lot of times there's so much going on at the racetrack, especially for your newer members. We could have 5 different groups coming in, moving in stuff that day, and they might need to get access to where you're setting up. And so I just want to try to, you need to try to coordinate with the track so you make sure you're not in their way and they're not in your way.
Yes.
And the setup time goes as smooth as possible.
Yeah. I can't stress this enough, Tim. Anything that your Raceway Ministry team is going to do, anything that needs to be clarified, discussed, make sure you know who your contact person is and get with that person weeks out from race weekend. The more you get done before race week, the better off everybody is. The guest services person or the operations person you're working with, your team, everybody will be less frustrated if you get all that stuff done ahead of time. And you've heard it from the horse's mouth there with Tim. Please, please make it happen in advance. Communicate, plan ahead, and talk with your contact person at the track. Very, very important. Now, if you're going to work in a donation situation, Tim, what do people need to understand? I know from our perspective in Raceway Ministries, if people need to be a 501c3 to get into a donation situation, we can help with that. If they need an I-9 form, we can assist with that. But what are the basic things that people need to know about the donation type situation? Just all the, the legal, logistic required necessary things.
Yes, sir. So before ISC and NASCAR merged, I believe a lot of the checks everything was handled at the track level.
Yes.
They had their own, we still have our own accountants here, but still, even to do all that now, we have to send everything to Daytona. So they require that we have an I-9 form on file. So we can't get a check issued until that form is completed properly and filled out correctly. And that's something else that goes back to weeks in advance, because it takes about, with us having 18 facilities now that operate, and you can imagine, as we said, the staffs have been trimmed and cut down. So we have a dedicated, hardworking group down in Daytona, but there's only a few people that have to do. And you can imagine all the bills and paperwork and everything that comes in, because they handle accounts receivable, accounts payable, the donation, the payments, the payroll, everything is done out of Daytona. So I have to have an I-9 on file, which we have here for the Henry County Baptist Association, just as a case in point. Mm-hmm. And I think it's Central Virginia Baptist Ministries for Richmond that we have set up now that we give a donation to. So but we have to have that I-9 on file. And one of the things I want to stress is make sure when you fill that out, don't assume anything on your end. Make sure you have the correct address, because I've had some I-9s filled out from some other civic groups, and like one put down an address that didn't match with their tax ID number, and they check all that stuff in Daytona. And so they won't write the check. And it took me, my first year doing this, as I was learning too, it took me almost 6 months to get somebody paid. And I just want to let everybody know now, if you work in any of my tracks, the first thing I do, I either try to go ahead and, like with Richmond and Martinsville, we have such a good enough relationship. I actually turn in the paperwork ahead of race weekend. I try to have the check in hand so I can give it to them in person on race weekend.
Perfect.
It makes life better for everybody.
Absolutely.
But for some other groups, for some usher groups that we have questionable numbers show up, I'm only allowed to pay for the people that actually show up. So I have to wait and do a roll call.
Sure.
But I check that with my lead contact the Monday after the race, and I have the paperwork turned in that next week, and it still takes about 2 weeks for it to go through the process and get the check cut. But I start following up with people immediately after the race weekend.
Well, and let me add this too for our attendees. Much of what you said, the same thing is required at the SMI tracks. You have to have an I-9. You need to be a 501c3, and everything has to be accurate. I mean, you better have your ducks in a row. So that's applicable, I think, across the board. But great point there. Now let's move on to scenario number 1 that you pointed out here. And you mentioned many of the same things that we've already talked about when you talk about the scenario number 1. Making contact with the representative from the raceway, very, very important. You mentioned that as a first step here. And I would say, yes, that's first step, and it needs to be done now. that needs to be established now. And then you mentioned meet on the property and scout out a location that'll work best. You've been very generous to us at our speedways to help us find the right location on the property. To me, the most important aspect of that is making sure that everybody's in agreement on that location and making sure everybody agrees on how that location is going to be used and for how long and when they're going to get there and all that kind of thing. Anything you need to elaborate on there, Tim?
You've hit the nail on the head there, sir.
Okay.
I think that's the key to it. Just making sure that everybody knows what's going on, so to speak.
Okay. And then you mentioned number 2, we've talked about this, make sure both parties have a clear understanding of the goals. And I would add to that, not only the goals, but the activities, the schedule, whether or not food's going to be involved and whether or not it conflicts with the vendors, all those sort of things. Anything that's going to impact the conduct of the group on the property, everybody needs to be on the same page going into race week.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Number 3, be willing to explore options or ideas that can provide assistance to the facility and achieve the goals for Raceway Ministry. Tim Byrd, you mentioned this. I think one of the best things for people to do is to approach a speedway and say, how can we serve you? And then be flexible and ready to respond. I remember when we went back to Las Vegas a few years ago, we asked them, how can we serve you? And they said, yeah, we need elevator operators. And I was like, oh man, are you kidding? That's not what we want to do. We want to be out in the campground with people, not stuck in an elevator 3 days, But it's turned out to be a fantastic ministry opportunity, and it opened the doors for many other ministry opportunities. So we just have to be flexible and open. Any elaboration on that?
Well, I would just think whatever task or responsibility that a Raceway Ministry group might be given, just do it in a way that's going to bring honor to the King.
Yes, there you go.
Good. And I'm not talking about Richard Petty. I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know you. I get it.
So, and if you do that, that's going to help that relationship to grow, prosper, and build, and give you hopefully the opportunities to do more.
Yeah.
It's going to give you more opportunities to serve, more opportunities to minister.
Yeah, good word. Excellent. Good word. Items to keep in mind for discussion. Where and when to pick up credentials. We've talked about that. Where will your volunteers be allowed to park? Another very, very important thing.
Always a big one. Yeah.
Yes, that's a big one. Do not overlook that. And let me stress again, arrange that in advance, as far out as you can, so that your volunteers know where to park and they don't park somewhere they're not supposed to and end up getting their vehicle towed. So just take care of that. You also say, if you need camping, please confirm as soon as possible the number of spots and the days you'll need them. So Tim, any elaboration on that?
No, just we try our best. Obviously, just to let everybody know, a lot of times the full hookup sites are revenue generators for the track.
Yeah.
Your track might have the facilities and resources. The 3 tracks I mainly work with, and Watkins Glen for that matter, I have 4 of the oldest tracks that NASCAR owns. So our resources are very limited compared to, say, a Phoenix or somewhere like that might have more resources. But we have volunteers that come into Martinsville and Richmond that need some campsites, and some of the volunteers. I know Glenn made the trip all the way down a couple years ago to Darlington, and although we don't have hookups there, we're able to provide camping spots and things of that nature. And I'll do what I can to assist there as well. But we just try to make sure that we have that taken care of to provide. If you got some volunteers that are coming in from way out and they need a camper, we want to try to work with them as much as we can, at least at my tracks for sure.
Good, for sure. Well, now the last 3 points you have here. Number 4, hours of operation each day. Number 5, contact numbers or a list to share with both parties. Any items needed by Raceway Ministries, such as meals, ice, power, water. I would just say, again, communicate, and do it well in advance with the appropriate contact person. I think those are the 3 key elements in everything that we've talked about. Know your contact person, build a relationship with them, communicate with them often and frequently and thoroughly, and then also make sure you do as much as possible in advance, because all these things will log jam when it comes to race week if you don't take care of it weeks out as much as you can. All right. What a thorough look at expectations on the part of NASCAR and Raceway owners and operations people when it comes to Raceway Ministries work. Tim, I can't thank you enough for putting this together and elaborating on it. And Tim Byrd, I can't thank you enough for being a fantastic example of how it can work and work well with your Martinsville team. Any final word from you, Tim Byrd?
Well, again, I'm just a small part of a very blessed team that does great work here at Martinsville. I tell people this all the time. I've made some of the best Christian brothers and sisters, friends that I would have never made otherwise had I not been involved with this ministry.
Yeah.
They've been a blessing to me. And when you work alongside people like that, the long hours that you might put in on a race weekend, starting early in the morning, going in late at night, dealing with weather issues, it's made so much easier when you're working alongside Christian brothers and sisters. And it's just a great experience. And I would encourage anybody that hasn't been involved in it to give it a try. And I think it'll change your outlook.
All right. Good word. Tim Southers, any closing words from you?
I can't say it any better than Tim Byrd did. I just want to say something selfishly. I just want to thank everybody with Raceway Ministries that's helped me, because, it's been some very challenging times and years for me, health-wise and work-wise. And every group I work with, they want to pray with me. I can feel that. I can feel that support. And like Tim saying, you have Christian brothers and sisters as friends. I know there's been times I've had to go find somebody with Raceway Ministries, say, listen, can you talk to me for 5 minutes just to walk me off the ledge? Because I get called everything but a Christian on race weekend a lot of times, especially with people with liquid courage and things of that nature.
Oh, yeah.
And just knowing that we have, as a person of faith, and I'm far from perfect, as we all know, only one perfect person ever walked this earth, but just knowing I've got somebody I can go talk to, or I can lean on, when I need that, or just to help me out, or just to tell them a situation. And a lot of times the volunteers of Raceway Ministries have helped give me ideas to go handle certain situations that are very challenging and very difficult. So I just want to thank everybody for that.
We're here for each other.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. And we're very, very grateful to have that kind of working relationship with most of the people at most of the raceways where we go. So Tim, thank you for putting this into words for us. I'm just going to challenge our attendees at the conference. These are the guidelines. These are the expectations. And if your group is conforming to these things and experiencing the success that goes along with it, then praise God and thank the Lord for it. But if you need to make some adjustments in your Raceway Ministry team to adapt and adjust to these standards, it might be time to make some adjustments and conform to what's expected from the perspective of Raceway staff. So thank you all so much, Tim and Tim. And
one last thing I want to just say, Roger, if you
yes,
don't
sir.
mind. This is a living document. I certainly don't know everything. And if any of your members out there and they have experience or they've dealt with situations at other tracks, please feel free to reach out to me anytime and share that, because we can always get better. We can always learn, and we can always try new things to make the whole experience better for everybody. So
Absolutely.
Please don't think this is just the only way it can be done. This is just the guidelines to help make it as smooth as possible and to be prepared as possible. But I welcome any feedback at all, because there are no wrong answers. So.
Yeah. All right, good word, guys. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your thoughts. We'll look forward to spending some time talking about this, probably in the hallways and during break times at the conference, and I think we'll all benefit from it. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.